Patty. Okay, I might need to call her, but I can see her on the screen, but she's not. I need to call her up just quickly. I can see you. I tried unmuting you as the host. Okay, I've unmuted you. Can you say something and see if we can hear you on the screen? No. No. Do you see an icon to turn on the why don't you log out and log back in? And are you sure you're using the link that was sent an hour ago this morning?
She couldn't be on that.
Yeah. All I can say is maybe log out and log back in. I have no idea where you're having this problem because other people have been able to log in without that. You want to just try that, Patty? Okay. Let's give her 1 second to work out these technical difficulties. Now, one other thing I'll say while we're waiting for Patty is this is actually our first full board public Zoom meeting. We have published the information on our website. At this point, we don't have any guests, but I think we may have some people join us. And I've also sent an invitation to Erwin. Now, Erwin will join, so you see his face on the screen and all of that when he does join, because I sent him an individual invitation. If anyone comes in through the website, you'll see them listed as an attendee. Patty's back. Patty, can you hear us? Okay, this is really odd. I haven't had this problem with Zoom before, and Patty's used Zoom a lot. Patty, can you hear us at all? Yeah, I really don't know what to do in this instance. Try her again. One option may be for her to come in as an attendee if there's something. Well, I could also try going in and resending the link. Let me log in. Yeah, I think I can. That might be a good thing. Patty? Yeah. Okay, well, you can also try the link as an attendee. If for some reason there was a problem in the link that was sent, I can actually raise you from an attendee to a panelist. Okay, you'll just call in. I'm sorry about that, Patty, but it's important for you to be on this call. Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we all heard that. Patty is going to call in. Actually, while we wait for her, there's one thing which I've mentioned to Patty, and I want to tell people. Anyway, so since we have this minute while we wait for her, Tess Fox is now reconstituting Generation J, which those of you who've been around for a while will remember. This is our youth-oriented national committee. It's been kind of dormant for a few years now. And since she's joined us as an at-large director with a 2-year term, she's reconstituted that. They're now a committee of 7. They have yet to hold their first meeting, but they're going to do that soon. They're going to talk about possibly renaming it and their focus and goals. And so Tess will have a report for us at the April board meeting with the other national committees. So thank you for doing this test. It's very important work.
Yeah.
Good. So we look forward to hearing you. And I'm going to see if Patty has joined the line. Okay. I don't know if she's called in. We could actually start with the approval of the minutes because we do have a long agenda. Wait, I think she's coming in now. Patty, can you hear us? Patty.
Hi, one more time. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yay, thank you.
Yay.
I'm very sorry to have delayed you. I was trying to come in on my iPad. For some reason, it wasn't connecting. And so I'm on a computer without a camera, but I can hear and see everybody. And again, sorry for delaying everyone.
No, I completely understand. I'm sorry about that. Now we have two people who've popped up. We have Patty, we have you, but we also have someone on the phone. Can that person on the phone identify themselves? Because it just shows a number. No.
Yeah, this is Yvette. Yvette Davila Richards.
Oh, Yvette. Oh, I'm so glad you could join us. And for those of you who don't know, Yvette is joining us from work. She works on Saturday afternoons. So thank you for calling in, Yvette, from work. Okay, so Matt, if you will add those two to the roll call, and we're basically just starting the meeting now. We're starting 10 minutes late due to technical difficulties. Okay, so moving right along to the approval of the minutes. Some brief background here. Some of you noticed we did not have minutes on the website for most of the last year. The most recent minutes were from January 2018. So Jennifer and I searched through the Dropbox folder at work and found a bunch of old minutes and read through them. And it turned out many of them had been approved, but for whatever reason hadn't been posted. So those are on the website now. We did find these 1 minutes from a primarily executive session in March that we could not find anything in the other, the subsequent minutes had been approved. So we do need to approve those to be able to post them. And of course, the last meeting of the year, EIJ, the next board has to approve. So because most people would want to abstain if they weren't in a meeting, I think we need to go through these as quickly as possible, one by one, and vote to approve. And if you weren't present or part of the board at that time, just abstain. And Matt, how do you want to do this? Do you want people to actually raise their hand to show if they're voting or abstaining for you to be able to take minutes?
Here, wait, let me unmute myself.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me? I think we should just vote. I'm sure this will be mostly unanimous, and then do the yays, and then I'll call for abstentions. And so as you abstain from each, then just show me that you're abstaining. That's probably the easiest way.
That makes sense. Well, let's go through these as quickly as possible. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from March 19th, 2018? Lauren, I saw your hand. So Lauren, so moved. Do we have a second? Tess, is that you? Oh no, I saw Mike raise his hand. Tess, you just clicked on. Second, Mike. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Please call out your name. I see Tess. I see Yvette Walker. I see Michael Savino.
I'll abstain too. I wasn't there.
Okay.
I have Fox, Savino, Walker, and Hall abstaining.
Okay. Okay, the minutes are approved. Next, do we have a motion to approve the September 27th, 2018 minutes?
So moved.
Lauren, do we have a second? Mike Riley. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? Michael Savino, Tess Fox, who else?
What was the date for this again?
Oh, this was the last meeting of the last term. So yes, anyone who's new to the board is actually not in that meeting. So
Just abstain for me.
okay. Did you get that, Matt?
I can
Yeah,
hear.
I have Savino, Fox, and Walker. Although Kroll and Hernandez weren't on the board then, right?
Yeah. Okay, so they'll abstain. Okay, moving along to this term. Now we're getting to meetings people are on. I should ask if there's any changes. September 30th, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Michael Savino. And second, Lauren.
And I just wanted to point something out. I sent a correction to headquarters and Matt. The section now reads appointed board members. It had read executive committee. There was some confusion in how that section was initially written, and so they cleared it up, and it's correct now.
Is it correct in the packet?
It's correct. Yeah, Billy updated the packet that's posted. So if a member, if one of us printed this earlier, then they wouldn't see it. But anybody who goes online right this moment will see the correct minutes.
No, but the important thing is that when we approve it, they will publish the minutes online that are in the packet now. So they're okay.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Any other corrections or questions? Okay.
Yes, Patty. This is Patty.
Yes.
Typing in. On page 12 in the minutes for September 30, there's a figure that I believe is incorrect. It indicates that Koch Institute gave EIJ $25,000 but the material that we used for the task force indicated 20. And so if we can make
I
sure that
believe,
the number is correct.
yeah, this is tough, Patty, because I believe the confusion came from that they came in at a level which is 20 to 25,000. So early on, people were putting 25,000. The problem is that the minutes are a record of what was said, and we may have said 25. I don't know if, because the minutes are a summary, we should leave it out to avoid future confusion. I don't know if we should change it if 25 was what was said, even if we later found out it was incorrect. That's a good point. But on the other hand, if we have that information on one place on our website and we have other information in the task force, that could lead to confusion. What do you think, Patty?
I'm coming back to how it was worded in the minutes here. Sorry, I've got two screens that,
Yeah.
let's see.
And this is on page 12. Let me look.
Yeah, it's on page 12, and it's a paraphrase
Yeah, I
from
see it.
Allison. It's a
Yeah.
paraphrase from Allison. So I just would like it to be consistent, and I would like it to be accurate. And if the real number was 20, let's make it 20 if we can, please.
I'm okay with that because it's difficult to go back and even know if she said 20 or 25, but we know 20 is correct. Are other people okay with that? Lauren?
Well, my suggestion, somebody maybe at headquarters can watch the video so that it's accurate, and then Andy put in the chat box to do an editor's note, so that way it's accurate on both fronts.
I like that idea because the minutes should always be a record of what was said. So someone at HQ, Allison's on the line, make that happen. Someone at HQ listens to it. If we said 25 on the day, leave 25 with an asterisk, and then the footnotes say the actual number was 20. We later confirmed the actual number was 20.
Okay.
Is the board all right with that? Any other suggestions or comments? Okay. Okay, moving on to a vote. All those to approve these minutes say aye.
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 Okay, aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? Most of you were on the board, but there were a couple. Deb Kroll, Victor, and Yvette on the phone. I think you're all appointed later, so I guess the three of you should abstain. I believe everyone else was in the meeting. Okay, moving right along, our final minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the December 1st minutes?
So moved.
That's Michael Savino. Do we have a second? Tess. Okay, any comments, discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? Excellent. I know that was a bit time consuming, but it was very important to get caught up. We're now fully caught up, and very shortly, headquarters should have all those posted to our website. Yes, Matt?
Quick point of order. I think by my math, because I wasn't at the meeting for the first set of minutes that we approved back in March,
Right?
who wasn't on the board, it's only 7 votes to approve those minutes. I don't know if that's a majority, if that's an issue, if we need to kick that to a subsequent meeting, or if that's A-okay. I just raised it for discussion.
Yeah, this is the problem with, of course, waiting a full year to approve minutes. We certainly have a unanimous vote of the people on the board who were present. I mean, I'd have to check Robert's rules to make sure that's okay with the approval of minutes. But I mean, we have a unanimous of everyone on the board who was present. Who was 7. It's not a majority of the board, but I think that will be okay. I can look into that or ask Bob.
10-4.
Okay, and we'll check that before we put the March minutes on. But I just want to get these all updated so we no longer have any questions out there about why we don't have minutes. Okay, that was very important. Tedious but important exercise to approve the previous minutes, and we're caught up there. Moving along, Allison, you need to unmute yourself and tell us about this new student chapter approval.
I come to you requesting approval for the Ann Arbor chapter of SPJ. They come with 22 new members and 2 advisors. The school is home to the 128-year-old Michigan Daily, which is independent and student run. They also have a student run TV station and radio station. And our packet is complete with the bylaws, all of the bios for the members, the advisors, etc. And they're asking for your vote to allow them to have a new chapter.
Okay, is there, well, I guess first we'll do the motion and then have discussion. So is there a motion to approve this chapter?
I move.
That's Patty, okay. And is there a second?
Second.
And that was Yvette Walker.
No, that was Sue.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sue. I'm sorry, she raised her hand. So the second is Sue. Okay, is there any discussion?
I would like to just say I have never seen such a complete application from a student chapter. So hats off to whoever was working with them, and of course to the students themselves for a really thorough and sincere and complete application. It looks like they're ready to hit the ground. And as the former Region 4 director, I will definitely, once we have approved this, I will definitely reach out to them and give them some SPJ love. Always happy to see the great activity behind this.
Okay, it was an amazingly thorough application. Any other discussion before we proceed to a vote? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, the chapter is approved. Okay, moving right along. Patty, would you like to give us the EIJ 19 update?
Yes, thank you. I included a short memo in your packet. We are really getting down to brass tacks. We had some preliminary meetings in the fall, and we have a schedule to meet twice a week now through mid-March as we go through about 160 proposals. As my memo indicates, we have 4 topic areas that we're seeking to adhere to, and we'll seek to have a roughly even number of programs. I've been very pleased with the staff support. Larry's on the calls, Marina is on the calls. Marina very quickly updates the entire committee with what was decided, what was discussed, so that we have good notes to work from. So all is well as we move along, but as I say in that memo, if you have ideas, please get them to me, even though we're past the deadline for submitting proposals. Obviously, our board can still weigh in on ideas, topics, panelists. We're very early in all of that. In particular, last year, our board was tasked with putting together what was called the SPJ 5, 5 programs that were of most interest to our members. And the committee has not yet determined if that's a good idea to repeat. The space is spaces will be tighter in San Antonio, so we've really got to go with the very best programs. So again, if you have ideas on any of that, please do be in touch with me directly. Thank you.
Yes, and in addition to ideas, I can tell you, having been in Patty's position before, that also anyone who's interested in helping to organize, moderate, lead, that's very important, because sometimes we have ideas on the committee, things come up at the last minute that, breaking news that you want to do. So it's very good to get that from our board. Do I see Lauren, your hand up?
Thanks, Alex. I just wanted to briefly mention that during the executive committee meeting last weekend, we talked about having either a super session or a panel with the fellows. So not just the 100 people who are at the President's Installation Banquet see them, but that everybody has access. And so just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that that's something that's being discussed.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Does anyone have comments about EIJ? Yes, Yvette Walker, I should make clear.
Patty or anyone, if you have submitted panel ideas, or if you know of some that have been submitted where you have invited guests, but you maybe not confirmed, when the confirmations come in, should we just reach out to you directly or to the office? Some people maybe that have been invited to be on a panel would like to know if it's been approved before they confirm yet. Some people confirm right away. So how do you want, in particular me, because I did submit a couple, how would you like to handle that?
Sure. Well, I can briefly tell you the process. When we get through the whole 160 and have the number that we think we'd like to go forward with, staff, probably Marino, Marina, sorry, would be the person who then would communicate with everybody who has submitted a a flushed out proposal and even just an idea, to let them know whether it was accepted, not accepted, or somewhere in between. And somewhere in between means, in concept, we like this idea. We might like to combine your idea with somebody else's idea. And perhaps, Allison, you could tell us roughly, or Larry, you're in the room, roughly the timeline when panel ideas, folks who submitted panel ideas, when they will learn the outcome. I'm forgetting the timing on that.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think that we're looking at having the decisions wrapped up by mid to late April, or mid-late March, I should say.
Mid to late March. Okay, super. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions about EIJ? Okay, moving right along. Next, we're going to start discussing a couple of things that could be long conversations, the anniversary plans and the budgeting plan. And now that we're past some of the procedural things, I want to do something that we tried in the executive committee meeting last time, which is we will limit non-presentation comments to 2 minutes. At that point, if no one has their hand raised, the person can continue. If people are raising their hands, we'll move on, and you can come back in if you have more to say. It just keeps, with such a large group in particular, just keeps the conversation moving. So this is Allison's report on planning so far for the 110th and the 50th anniversary. And I should also mention that in the executive committee meeting last weekend, we did discuss the ways that the board could be involved in these and the possibility of creating committees, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in the discussion. But first, I'd like you, Allison, to present your plan and your memo. And you do need to unmute.
Thanks. So last year after EIJ, the staff brought to my attention that SPJ would turn 110 in 2019. During one of our staff meetings, because we were trying to think of ways to promote SPJ for fundraising in advance of our Day of Giving and fundraising early part of the year. This was a discussion that was led largely by Larry and I. And I think it was Billy who also said, Billy, our website guy in Chicago, who also said, oh yeah, and it's also an anniversary for women. And it's 50 years. So I said, okay, so let's talk about this and figure out how to do it. At which point I mentioned it a few times in my weekly report. And so we came together to try to see what we could do to recognize both anniversaries in the attempt to raise additional funds for SPJ. Now, of course, this, you'll notice in the document that I provided, we're not looking at having a luncheon, a banquet, or anything that would cost us money, because we're operating in a deficit year and we can't afford that sort of event. Even if we had an event like that that was sponsored, the amount of time it would take from the staff, it would cost us quite a bit in productivity. And I don't know that the return on investment would be really sort of large enough, because, you know, you think of where do you have it? Do you have it in Indianapolis? Or do you have it a place where there are more journalists in bigger cities like New York or Boston or whatever? So we didn't even think along those lines. The plan is heavy on marketing. So logos, thank you letters that will have a temporary 110th anniversary logo. We do have lapel pins, yoga mats that were suggested by the staff, and I think are good ideas. But we can only produce those if we have sponsorship for them. The 110th pin, we get 220 of them, so it will cost us a couple of $100s, and we're sure we can get a single sponsor to sponsor those. But of course, we would sell them for a lot and could stand to and could wind up raising quite a bit from those. The yoga mats, we intend to continue to experiment with the idea of having an exercise yoga program at EIJ that's voluntary. People can come to before sessions. We tried it in Baltimore. We didn't advertise it, and we didn't do a very good job of advertising it in advance. So the turnout was small, but we think it might be popular. The other organizations do it at their conferences, including ONA, NABJ, and RTDNA is on board with it because it doesn't cost us anything. We have the room and we have a staffer who's a certified yoga person. Her idea was to have a limited number of yoga mats with the logo, the women's logo on it that people could buy. And she is reaching out to, or had planned to reach out to 3 major yoga, not only mats, but yoga suppliers who give yoga pants, yoga mats, and that sort of thing, to see if they would want to sponsor giving us these mats and putting the logo on it. For the 50th anniversary, we had not planned to do any major thing other than have a story in quill and produce, if we can get the sponsorship for it, a limited number of scarves that can be sold at EIJ with the logo that says 50 celebrating women, but no sort of other special kind of event sort of thing. I'm gonna let Larry jump in here because I think that the proposal is pretty self-explanatory. We believe, and I've seen this myself as someone who's fundraised a lot, and Larry whose profession is fundraising, that anniversaries can bring in quite a bit of money because you count on nostalgia. It's a way to bring in unrestricted funds that's not tied to a project, and people will say, oh, I'll give $1,000 because it's 110th anniversary, and no one else is celebrating 110th anniversary in the work that we currently do. Not RTDNA, not NAB, none of them, because we're the oldest, and so we wanted to sort of take advantage of that. That was the idea behind it. We welcome any suggestions. We absolutely welcome any help. We're already into February, and this is the anniversary year, so we're hoping to get this started so that Larry can really push this before the Day of Giving, which is in April, right? Oh, you're muted. Alex, you're muted.
I forgot. I was being a good neighbor and muting myself. Sorry, I was just asking if Larry had anything to add to that before we threw it open to the board commentary. Not so much about the product, which Allison explained in detail, but other aspects of the fundraising.
Yeah, one thing, my previous employer, before this, we celebrated a 40th anniversary. Again, not a typically momentous one usually, but we had never really done any significant fundraising, kind of similar to what we are here, never been really aggressive fundraising. And we, through some marketing, went to some events, we raised $76,000, which is way more than we'd ever raised before. So I think there are a lot of opportunities here to, one, highlight our history, but two, it's nice to be able to peg a number to use as a donation amount. So like giving $110 or things like that. So there are a lot of opportunities here that we can use for marketing to kind of help set the amount. Because what I like to do is that people who give $25 because they just always give it $25, now we say, well, $110 for 110 years. Gives them hopefully something to move up to. You're muted again, Alex.
Excellent. Okay, we'll open up to conversation. Thank you, Patty, for joining us by video. You're obviously using Allison's link. I would just comment. The links are all identified by name, which is great, but just FYI, that's not Allison. Okay, Lauren, I see your hand. Yeah, you're next.
Thanks, Alex. What I'm going to say now, I said last week at the executive committee meeting, I feel really strongly that we should in no way officially recognize the fact that we didn't admit women until 1969. And that's very different from celebrating accomplished women in journalism our first leaders, our first women members. And if necessary, I will make such a motion, but I think it's a huge mistake from a reputation standpoint, from telling people that it's okay that we didn't admit women until 50 years ago. And I also want to make a comment, because I don't think that this was what was intended, but when I read through and I saw that we were going to have yoga mats to celebrate women, I found that to be incredibly sexist and offensive. It's one thing if we want to do yoga mats with the regular SPJ logo and sell them like we sell the other stuff in the Infomart, but I'm going to guess I'm not the only person who would have that reaction. So at this point, I'm not going to make a motion yet to let other people speak, but if necessary, I'm going to move that we do not in any way officially recognize the 50th. The logo is great, Tony is great, but it's not an appropriate logo to have or use.
Okay, Sue, I saw your hand. You're next. And then Alice.
Yeah, I want to share with the group some information I also shared last week with the executive committee. Andy and I, at this time, in fact, last week, were at a program sponsored by the DC SPJ Pro Chapter, celebrating folks with long tenure with SPJ from 5 years up to actually 65 years. And there were about 36 people. And we took the opportunity to sort of run these ideas past them. I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but there was very little interest, frankly. They were not impressed by a 110th anniversary celebration. They too were really unhappy, some of them only learning that women had been a member, for 50 years, assuming that they had always been a member. So that was one thing. And they, like Lauren has suggested, the only thing they really wanted to do was note the success of the women of SPJ, point out the breakthrough with our presidents, our female presidents, point out some of the standouts, perhaps go back and feature in a Quill article as well. Some of the women who were among our first members of SPJ, those were the only thing, and these were really passionate people. And I will tell you, the audience there was, I would say, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was probably at least 50% women, if not more. And some of them were young adults. So I was kind of surprised that were some young members there. But that's a pretty broad cross section, and I would be very concerned about the way in which we proceed. But I would agree with Lauren. I don't know that we want to draw that much attention to the fact that women were not a part of this, have not been a part of this throughout its entire history.
Okay, I saw Allison next, and then Patty. So Allison, you have the floor.
I think if we decide, of course, I think it's quite a big thing that women have been part of SPJ for so long, and they weren't part of other organizations at all. So I take a different view. But if we decide not to recognize or promote in any sort of way 50 years of women, then I think that we must agree to a plan if we're going to talk to women and ask them to participate in any sort of thing in Quill, because someone will bring it up. Especially if we reach back to Charlene Hunter Galt and all these other women, they will bring up that it used to be an all-male organization and we were among the first. So we need to be prepared on how we will deal with that, and if we're going to take it out of their comments when they mention it, because we can't control how they feel about it and if they mention it. So we should just have a plan, or maybe not mention it at all, not do anything on women in SPJ during this year.
Okay, Patty had her hand up next. I also want to say for anyone on the phone, basically, obviously, you can't raise your hand, so you'll just have to unmute yourself and say that you want to raise your hand in between speakers. Patty was next.
I have a slightly different view as well. I think it's perfectly fine to acknowledge that we've had women for 50 years. I think in the same venue and with the same kinds of opportunities, we should tell our story of 50 women. And if part of that story is we were late to the game, or it was a rough onboarding, or there was some controversy, etc., all of that is really interesting. and is part of our history. But I am not offended by bringing attention to the fact that this is the 50th year of women in SPJ. I will, however, concur with Lauren's point. I wouldn't like any merchandise that has the, that's pink, right? I think to me, that's offensive. I don't need a scarf. I don't need a yoga mat. If there's 50th, let it be available to all members and have it be gender neutral, would be my take on that. Thank you.
Good. Yvette Walker?
I agree with Patty. I'm not offended at all. It is our history. I certainly would not want to curtail or edit any content that would bring that up, which I know, Allison, you wouldn't want to do that either, but I'm just saying, to me, that goes against everything that we would stand for. So it happened. I mean, I just really am not offended with it at all, but I really like the idea of focusing on the women themselves, you know, perhaps more than the year, but we do it in this 50th year, you know? So if that means that we don't do merchandising with the logo itself, but if we still wanted to do merchandising, we could say celebrating women in SPJ and not necessarily focus on the 50. I'm also not offended with the merchandising ideas that were brought up, but I understood, and maybe I'm wrong, but I understood that the yoga mats had to do with the 110th, not the 50th anniversary, and the scarf had to do with the 50th. Am I incorrect on that? But I'm neutral on that. We could have merchandising or not. I love Larry's idea about $110 for 110 years. It is also a great idea to help people just come up to the next level if they've been thinking about it, and even if they haven't been thinking about it. It is kind of it's not a really big year, so we don't have to do a big event, but just that alone, I think could be a fundraiser, and I think it's a nice way to celebrate our 110 years. But am I incorrect on the yoga mats being for the 110th and not the women? Alex, you're muted.
I'm going to stop muting. First, I'd like Allison to answer the question about the yoga mat versus the scarf, and then Lauren has her hand up, but I want the answer to that question, Allison, on the merchandise.
Yes, the mats were for, we're going to have the 50-year women, even though we know that last year we got quite a few men in the yoga class. But we haven't done anything.
Yeah, okay.
Could we simply reverse them now that question has been raised? Like, do only women do yoga? Could we just put the 110? Okay, problem solved. Okay, Lauren, you're next.
Okay, so I wanted to be clear, I would never suggest trying to censor any of our members in speaking. And if somebody wants to speak to being one of the first members, of course they should do that. But I think at this point in time, I want to make a motion, and I move that SPJ officially does not recognize the 50th anniversary of women in a formal way.
Has everyone, now very few people have been able to speak. I want to see a raise. Oh wait, someone's on the phone. Yvette?
Yeah,
Yvette on the
me.
phone.
Hey guys. Hi, good afternoon everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, good afternoon to everyone first of all. But I wanted to say that I'm for celebrating the women joining the organization. We need to let everyone else know about that. I'm all in with that, and if there's anything I can do to help in regards to that, I'm for it. In terms of the merchandising, for what I've been hearing you all say, I agree. We don't need to specify. It should be gender neutral and for all, but I do like the idea of celebrating women having joined the organization. I mean, we've come a long way. Why not let the world know about that? So I just wanted to let that be known. Thank you.
So okay, I was in the middle of making a motion and was cut off. So
right. Well, okay, we can continue the discussion after you make your motion. Then I had just asked because very few people have been able to speak to this point yet. But go ahead, Lauren, with your motion.
Okay. I move that SPJ not officially recognize the anniversary of admitting women 50 years ago, not use a logo or sell any merchandise related specifically to the 50th. I also move that in 2019, we celebrate the women of SPJ and form a committee with SPJ board members to help work with staff to come up with ideas to do that, including the ideas such as quill articles featuring prominent SPJ women.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
This is Sue. I'll second it.
Okay, Sue seconded. Okay, now we continue with the discussion. Donald Myers had his hand up, I believe, most recently. So Don, go ahead.
Thank you. I would vote against this motion because I believe that, A, we have to recognize our history, and B, the fact is we can use this to celebrate, the accomplishments of women in journalism and also basically, how we have progressed. Because I know in my church, we recently had a big celebration of the fact that 40 years ago, we allowed Black people to hold the priesthood. And I mean, it was a wonderful, joyous celebration. I mean, there was nothing negative about it. So, I mean, I see nothing wrong with, highlighting the fact that, 50 years ago, SPJ came to its senses and has been a better organization for it.
Okay, any further discussion? Matt?
I just want to two things really. One is I love that Allison's discussion of this said that she has one donor who's ready to give us $50,000 because we have a budget deficit, and that would almost eliminate it single-handedly. And then just to ground everyone who isn't aware, the executive committee discussed this last week and took 2 formal votes. One was unanimous to have SPJ establish a working group to work with staff to celebrate women this year. It was kind of just generally stated like that. The second was to require board reps together with staff to plan the 110th anniversary at no cost to SPJ. So those are my two driving forces. I would rather pick a few of us.
Mm-hmm.
I can even suggest some names. Lauren and Sue, obviously, are very passionate about this issue, to work with Allison and others to pull off these anniversary recognitions, both the 110th and the 50th. And my suggestion would be, rather than restricted at this point, to pick members who can take this offline, because we have a busy meeting ahead of us, not to marginalize these two things because they're important, clearly, but that we can pick 3 of us who can work with Allison on the 110th and on women to pull off recognitions at no cost. Thank you.
Okay, Michael Koretsky, you need to unmute.
I agree with what Matt said, and I wonder if Lauren and Sue should be on that committee. I guess my only contribution to this is, I don't know who's the youngest person here, maybe Tess, but I do know that, we need to prepare for it, but that when we start celebrating 50 years, somebody on Twitter or Facebook is going to do the math and is going to make a snarky comment. And I think Lauren's concern is, what do we say back? And are we prepared for that? And I don't know that we are. So whatever we do, I like the idea of taking this offline, but putting it in the hands of the people that were most passionate about it.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Joe Radsky.
I think I would be in favor of Patty and Sue's motion. I think there is space in our 110th celebration to embrace and to celebrate the women of SPJ.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Does anyone else have their hand raised for discussion? Victor.
Yeah, hey guys, really quick, because I do think that these are somewhat separate issues than when we're talking about the 50th and then the 110th. And so the 50th is really ripe for good discourse here. I'd rather not focus on that. But I do have a point on the 110, and that is, look, we're like 30 days into the new year, and thematically speaking, we can tell that 2019 is just going to be a tremendously difficult year in terms of job loss and contraction, and a lot of the changes that are taking place in terms of full-time positions. And I think rather than come at an opportunity to truly celebrate and cheer on the great 110-year unprecedented history, which in its own right is absolutely amazing, how do we provide the right theme and scope that really capitalizes on what's going on across the industry? So it's, yes, we've reached 110. How do we work with the rest of the industry and our members to ensure there's another 110? And then I think that's where that match campaign comes into play. But, you know, we amongst ourselves have spent the last couple of weeks trying to promote resources through SPJ and help colleagues across the industry, even our own folks who have been affected on the board. So how do we ensure that this isn't just simply a PR cheerleading, rah-rah, look what we've done over 100 years, but really that we're trying to provide the proper urgency to ensure that there's vitality and sustainability going forward in terms of the work, the journalism, and the jobs available. Thanks.
All excellent points, and I think that is something that committee would do. Yes, Allison.
I think it's important just for newcomers. I'm sure that Lauren and Alex and you guys know this, but remember that SPJ was Sigma Delta Chi, an all-male fraternity, which at the time of its founding in 1909 was normal. All fraternities were all male or all female. The first co-ed fraternity did not happen until 1963. And that was at the University of Illinois in Chicago, Phi Alpha Tau. So it's not like we were late coming to the table and women were being admitted at record numbers in all male fraternities. So we have to remember that history of it, that at the Powell University, where we recently visited, and where they have all kind of posters and everything talking about we're the home of SPJ, and they have some stuff about women coming into the organization. And if you Google deep enough, you'll see interviews in major publications when the first women started coming into SPJ. So I just wanted to provide that history or reminder in case people didn't know. And to Victor's point, you know, this is the Year of the Woman, especially when it pertains to politics. And a lot of people have been dubbing it that because of the record number of women who have come into Congress, et cetera. We hope to capitalize a little bit on that at EIJ to just talk about the accomplishment of sort of women in general. But to your point, this, and I don't know if this is the same with the 110, but we are, and Larry, we've been talking a lot about how to deal with the massive job losses and how we can better benefit members, not just every day that we come into the office, but at EIJ. How can our job fair this year be the best? Because of course we're going up against, you know, NABJ like a month before us, and they already have 4,000 registrants for their conference. And so we've been talking with Alberto from NAHJ, RTDNA, so that we can make sure that people actually walk out the door with something.
Okay, I have a couple of questions here. First of all, I see Michael has a friendly amendment in chat. Patty, I think your hand first before Michael's. Did you have your hand up or were you just making an adjustment? Okay, Michael had his hand up then, so you are next, and we also you have a friendly amendment to make.
I was hoping Lauren would accept as a friendly amendment what Matt said. I think that's a great way to handle this, get some people offline that are into this to work with Allison, work with Alex. As a dude, I don't know the answer here, and so I'm going into demur. But we have a long agenda, like Matt said. There are people here that have thought about this more than I have. I don't want to vote based on thinking about this, just now. So I would love it if smarter people than me would.
Michael, I'm sorry, I thought you were done there. My only question with the friendly amendment is that what Matt was saying was quite different, because if I understood right, Matt was saying we would celebrate 50 years of women, but we would have a committee to do so, whereas Lauren's amendment, I believe, was saying we would not actually mention the 50-year anniversary. And so I don't know, Matt, was that what you were saying?
I was saying, again, my philosophy was not to be restrictive, but to be more broad and say, let the task force figure it out. I don't have a problem with whether we recognize 50 or don't recognize 50, as long as we're celebrating women. I think the 50 is going to come up. So I kind of think it's splitting hairs. The 50 is, as Koretsky said, the 50 is coming up. Someone's going to do the math. What Sue just said in the chat is that the National Press Club, which is older than us, didn't allow women until 1970. And to Allison's points about other fraternities admitting women in the 60s, I'm not too worried about the optics of it as much as others are, but I recognize that others are worried. I'm a man, so that, you know what I mean? I think we should let people who are passionate about this be on a group with some broad discretion, and they can hash it out. And so I would suggest Sue and Lauren and a third member who wants to raise their hand, just so that we don't have a tie.
I just want to say, I think these are fundamentally different. So another option is simply to vote on the motion on the floor.
Actually, as the maker of the motion, I want to hear what they have to say to have the opportunity to decide whether I want to accept a friendly amendment. So I want to make sure that I understand what the friendly amendment is that you're offering, Michael, that it's to form a working group of board members who will be named during this meeting to work with staff to celebrate women in 2019. So it does not affirmatively include the 50th. Is that correct?
Well, first of all, I do want to point out that
can work to make that decision that it's not.
Lauren, I do want to point out that not all of the board members are online, so we never name a task force or committee in the meeting, because we need to give the other board members a chance.
Okay, but it would be SPJ board members working with.
Yeah. Right. Well, it would be a task force. But I want to be clear, because Matt is not saying he wants to restrict us from celebrating the 50th. Your original motion did say that we would not celebrate the 50th. So we would have to dramatically rewrite that motion. Or if you want to keep your original motion and you want to leave it, we don't celebrate the 50th, we vote on the idea of celebrating the 50th or not. And if that does not pass, we then discuss.
Right. So I'm asking for clarity from Michael, because he's the one who asked me to make a friendly amendment. So am I clear that you're saying that you're recommending that I amend my motion, that the board create a working group of board members to work on the issue of celebrating women in 2019? Is that what I heard?
Bingo.
Okay, so in that language, it is not specific one way or the other about celebrating the 50th. That is to be determined by that working group. Is that correct, Michael?
Yes, with staff.
Okay, in that case, I will accept that friendly amendment. Sue, will you accept that as a seconder?
Okay. I think we need to then read aloud the motion, because your original motion specifically began with the fact that we would not celebrate the 50th. So that would have to come out as part of the amendment. Matt,
I just stated I just amended the motion to what
we need actual language for people to vote on. Matt.
I think I have the language, but obviously it's Lauren, so I will read it and make sure that Lauren is okay with it. Two questions. One, the motion talks about board members, but not staff, and I heard Michael just reference staff.
And board members working with staff was my understanding.
Okay. And this...
And SPJ board members, so for complete clarity, it's among the 16 of us.
Okay.
18.
So what I have right now is the working group of board members, together with staff.
I do have a question about that, Lauren. Are we certain we need, I think it will be board members who volunteered. Typically, we don't limit task forces like that, because there may be, a previous board member. Do we want to, is it your intention to make sure that only current board members can do it? In other words, I don't know, if a previous board member, a previous regional director wanted to be on this task force, you would not permit them? Or you could say SPJ leaders. I'm just wondering if you want it limited to the current 18.
Well, I want people on this board who want to do it to have that opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. But do we want to limit the members so that no other SPJ leaders, such as one of this year's regional coordinators, for example, who's a woman, if she wants to do it, that language would prevent them from doing it? Or we'd have to amend the motion, is what I'm saying.
Right. I think it's fine to leave it as SPJ board members.
Matt.
If anybody here feels really strongly they know somebody who wants to do this.
Just two quick questions. This doesn't. So are we separating the 50th and the 110th, or can we have the same working group explore both issues?
I would separate it just because of timing for board members. Not everybody necessarily would have time, because it depends on how much time it would take for people to do both. So I think it's a good idea to separate it just for commitment purposes.
I'm sorry, Andy's had his hand raised for a while and he just put something in chat, so I want to recognize Andy. And you need to unmute.
Thank you. I raised my hand well before we got to this point, but I'm kind of conflicted on this. I see the point of wanting to highlight the good, which is that we are inclusive, but I don't think there's any way to get away from the bad, which is that for 60 years we were exclusive. I think it's too complicated to treat this as a celebratory thing. I like the idea of celebrating women. 2019 is the year of the woman. We don't need to explain why we're doing this year. It's just it's a good time to do it. I was at the meeting that Sue mentioned. There were a lot of people describing what the challenges of what it was like to be a woman in journalism in SPJ, but it's painful for them to describe the discrimination that they went through. I don't see a need to celebrate this through merchandise or fundraising and peg this as a milestone that we want to celebrate. Even though there's good intention behind it, I think it's too complicated to do that.
Okay. Well, we have a bigger issue here, I think, which is we need to understand what we're about to vote on. We could debate whether or not SPJ was late to the party. As Allison did point out, there were many fraternities and sororities in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. The problem is Lauren's original motion specifically—
That's no longer on the floor, Alex.
Okay, you've taken that off. You want to— Okay,
I already amended my motion
to vote on, because let me finish. The original motion said we would not recognize the 50th anniversary of admitting women. We would not have a logo. We would not do any of that. Matt's motion is very different. He's leaving that up to the committee to decide. So I need to know, we need to have language to vote on so the board members understand what they're voting on. Matt.
She accepted the friendly amendment.
Yeah, but we need language, because the friendly amendment is in fact an entirely different motion. It's not usually a friendly amendment is a tweak.
So Matt, do you have it?
We need the language. Matt.
Let her do
Matt has had his hand up. Would you both please allow Matt to speak?
My only suggestion is, yes, I have the language. I'll happily read it back whenever we're ready to vote. But I think we're getting hung up on process. Can't we just pick 3 people right now?
No, we actually need to vote before and we cannot pick people now because there are many board members who are not on this call. And they should, even though they're not able to vote on this, they should still be able to participate if they want to join the committee. That's not how we form a committee or a task force. We agree to form a committee or task force, and afterwards we discuss who's going to be on it. Matt, could you read the language that you have?
Sure, but a quick question. Why can't we just pick 3 people right now and move
Because we don't work that way. We want to give everyone an opportunity to be on this committee. Just because someone wasn't able to make this call doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to be on the committee.
We can make a motion to do whatever we want. So if Matt wants to make a motion, the people will be picked in this meeting. Let's do it. The whole point of this was to move.
The point is, actually, that's not entirely true. We do have Robert's rules. We do have laws. It's not that the board can just do anything it wants. Matt, would you like to read the language that you had for your friendly amendment? This is basically an entirely new motion. Please read it.
Yeah, well, I respect what you said, Alex, but I would suggest a friendly amendment that we name Sue and Lauren and the third.
But that's not what we were talking about. The motion has to clearly state whether we're doing what Lauren originally said, which is saying we will not celebrate 50 years, or whether we're doing what you said, Matt, which is that we will leave it up to the committee and the staff. Those are 2 different motions. I think actually the thing that makes the most sense is to vote on one motion. If it's voted down, to vote on the second.
It's not on the table anymore, Alex. I amended my motion.
Have you removed it from the table? But we haven't
I
heard.
already amended I accepted the friendly amendment.
Okay.
So under Robert's rules, that means it's no longer on the table.
Okay, we need to hear the language from Matt. It is not about picking individuals. We cannot do that in this meeting. What we need is the actual language.
We have in the past.
We need the actual language. Do you have the language, Matt?
I do, and I would go one step further and suggest that we name Sue Lauren and Yvette Walker.
No, but I need the language. You keep obsessing on it. We need the language.
I second Matt's motion.
But we haven't heard the motion. We need the language of the motion.
I will make whatever you want to call it, a friendly amendment to Lauren's motion or a motion.
Can you just
create a working group of board members to work with staff to celebrate women in 2019? And I would name Sue, Lauren, and Yvette Walker to that working group. All as part of one motion.
Yvette, you were named and you've had your head up for what? Hand up for a while.
I had my hand up not necessarily to join the committee, although I would be okay with that. But I had my hand up to say to Matt before he made the motion, is I do think I don't agree with naming people right now, because I think that as Alex said, it would leave out the opportunity for people to join. I totally agree with there being a group. If you'd like me to be on it, that's fine. I'm happy to be on it. But I think that we should not name this right now. But I'm happy
so
to
we have my motion's on the floor. Matt read it.
But we're having discussion. We have discussion before we vote. And I actually have not yet heard the language of the motion. Matt keeps telling who he wants to have on the committee, but I've yet to hear the language of the motion that we would be voting on. So can you please read that to us, Matt?
Yes. I would move to create a working group of SPJ board members to work with staff to celebrate women in 2019. And I would appoint Sue, Lauren, and Yvette Walker. I didn't hear you say no. I'm going to include John unless you speak now. And just for the record, there are only 2 board members not on this call, Kelly Kissel and Jeff South. They're both men, if that matters. All of the women on our board are on it, and I think this should be handled by women. So,
yeah, as a point of order, Matt, you were reading my motion, correct? And you are suggesting a friendly amendment to my motion.
Correct.
When I look at Andy, I see Robert's rules.
Deb,
so.
Deb Kroll has had her hand raised for a while. I recognize you, Deb.
Well, I was just going to mention that we can vote on the motion, call for volunteers, establish the volunteers, open it up to the 2 board members who weren't here at the meeting, and move on to the next thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's my suggestion.
Okay, so to be clear, the motion creates the task force, but it does not, like the original motion, say whether or not we will celebrate the 50th of women. That is up to the task force and headquarters.
no, well, it does say to celebrate women in 2019.
It says to celebrate women.
It says to celebrate women, but not to celebrate the 50th. It does not specify. The original motion said we would not celebrate. This one does not specify, and that's the...
Alex, this is Sue. Keep in mind when you do stories about this, as any good reporter would, the subject of the fact that, you know, we're marking, not celebrating. Women were not admitted until 50 years ago. That is a fact that would be incorporated in any story. So, you know, we cover ourselves that way. We're good reporters. That goes into the telling of the story. No more, no less. We are celebrating women in journalism and women in SPJ. End of statement.
Okay. Now, Yvette, you were mentioned in this motion. Do you...
No. This is my motion that's on the floor, and there has not been an amendment to my amendment, so there's no names at this point.
Okay, well, what Matt just read, we need to understand we're voting on. Matt just read something that named Lauren, Sue, and Yvette Walker, so I wanted to find out if Yvette could do it. Matt, are you willing to not do that? Matt?
Yeah, it's Lauren's motion. So if Lauren just wants to create a working group of SPJ board members to work with staff to celebrate women in 2019.
Is that fine?
That's the motion. Let's call the motion. Is there a second?
We need to understand the language. That's fine. Lauren, is that the language that you accept as a friendly motion?
I previously accepted that as a friendly amendment, and I still accept that as the new motion. And just
okay, would you read that, Matt? Because actually, that is different than what you said earlier. You move to create a working group with SPJ board members to work with staff celebrating women in 2019. Is that the full motion?
Lauren,
Yes.
that's what I read, yes.
Okay, but without the last part. Lauren, you accept that friendly amendment? And Sue, do you accept that friendly amendment?
I do, yes.
Okay, thank you. I believe we're ready to proceed to a vote now that we have the language. No further comment. I don't see any hands. Okay.
And just a point, if any man wants to be on this group, necessarily just be women. I just want to point that out. If any man is interested in being on this, please tell Alex.
Okay. I think we can proceed to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
nays? Any abstentions? Okay, we have a working group. I will talk, I think, to Matt, Lauren, and Sue after this call as the motion and the friendly and the second about how to proceed from here. Thank you, everyone. I know there was a bit of confusion there on friendlies, but we got through it okay. So, and we now have a working group. Moving along to the next item. This one we're going to have to do as a bit of a split because we're going to talk about planning for the 2020 budget, and we want to talk about. Sorry.
I don't think we finished with 110th. I have a question related to the 110th.
Okay, Lauren, proceed.
So this is just from a brand identity perspective. This is questions for the headquarters staff. I think the logo is great, but it's gold, and I don't understand why it's gold when that's not SPJ's colors. So I'm wondering why it's not either black or SPJ blue from a brand identity standpoint.
Okay, Allison.
I spoke to our creative director about that, and he said on a number of occasions when we've done special things, we have not stuck to the black and white or the SPJ blue. So he thought to distinguish this, since it's a temporary logo that we'd only use over the next 11 months, to make it stick out and make it different. And also for the lapel things that we're making, that gold would be a better color.
Good design. Questions? Matt, you had raised your hand. Did you have a question about 110?
No, I was just going to say we hadn't just concluded that issue yet.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So then also related to that, Matt had brought up earlier the motion that we approved unanimously in executive session on the issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that somebody from executive committee, should make that motion so we can discuss and vote on
Matt,
it.
you brought it up initially. Would you like to do that? And you also are the secretary treasurer and have the exact language in your minutes.
Sure. I move that board, together with staff, plan the 110th anniversary at no cost to SPJ. That was the motion that was approved by the executive committee.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Lauren is the second. Discussion. Does anyone have any questions, comments, ideas on the 110th anniversary? Okay. Slightly less vocal than 50 years of women. I don't see any hands.
Actually, hello. It's
oh,
Yvette.
wait, no, we have someone on the phone. Yvette DeVilla Richards.
Hello?
Please, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I just had an idea. Can we involve the chapters to try to do something in regards to the 110th anniversary? We will speak to either the chapter president and the VP to see what ideas they will be interested in focusing on, and maybe we can work with them.
That's
engage
a great
the
idea.
chapters to see if they want to also be involved in this, because then that'll bring more activity for the chapters and more reason for people to want to get involved with SPJ.
Excellent suggestion. I want to recognize Yvette Walker. I just also want to point out that I would also
Yvette Davila.
Yeah, I would say chapter and regional director, and there may be ways we can use Zoom. When I was planning this webinar, I realized we may be able to involve people in the planning that way if we want to bring in the regions and the chapters into an extended planning committee. Yes, Yvette Walker.
Hi. So I really like Yvette's idea. One question though, because we are already into the year, noting what Allison and Larry said, I am concerned about waiting too long to jump on it. Is it possible that we could agree that we are going to celebrate the 110 years and go ahead and move to certain collaterals and say give 110 or whatever? I like Victor's idea very much to determine like what are we going to do, but I wonder if there's two things here. Can we agree that we are going to celebrate 110, but then also leave it open to conferring with chapters and further discussion about how we are going to help journalists? That's kind of like another conversation. I feel like if we wait to have those conversations, it's going to be June and the year is halfway gone.
Yvette, you mentioned a motion. Would you like to make, oh, I'm sorry, I was talking to Yvette Walker. It's so confusing. Too many Yvettes and too many Michaels. Would one of you like to make a motion? Because Yvette Walker mentioned a motion. Would one of the Yvettes like to make that motion? Is that what you're saying?
To engage.
Sorry, Yvette on the phone.
Yeah, Yvette on the phone. You had something else to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, in regards to you saying that time-wise, that then it will be like June, since I proposed the idea, I don't mind if calling the chapters, if I had help from a staffer to put this in their head and give them like a timeline to get back with ideas. And I would follow up if I had help from a staffer. I don't mind doing that because I know time is of the essence and we need to be able to incorporate these ideas into the planning of the convention. So for me, I would give a timeline to them and I would make the calls along if I had the help of a staffer, and then confer and come back to the board with what we have based on then another timeline that we will set that will be agreeable.
Yvette on the phone, it sounds like you may have just volunteered for this task force. So beware. Okay. Do we have, so Yvette Walker, you mentioned a motion. Were you wanting to make a motion or did you want to hear more first?
Well, I just noticed in chat, Bill mentions that the actual founding birthday is April 17th. That gives us a little bit more time, I suppose, if we want to think about it that way.
Usually birthday years are celebrated in calendar years. I see Allison has a comment on that, as opposed to April to April. So Allison, did you want to comment on how that's usually handled in fundraising?
Yes, and then I'd like to turn it to Larry, who's had his hand raised. A lot of the people who we are approaching for funding, particularly foundations, are on a January to January calendar year. So they'll be out of money by April and we'll be too late to the game. So we started sort of talking to them late last year in November, December, saying, oh, and guess what? You know, our anniversary is next year. We're like been around a long time, kind of, you know, just a casual conversation. Larry?
I was just going to add to for Yvette on the phone. I would totally be a part of that conversation. I think there's a way to engage the chapters in a way that won't necessarily take a long time. So perhaps there's an idea where they can be involved with telling your stories from your history or something like that. So it engages them in a way that also allows us to move forward with the planning.
I think that we're very excited that the board wants to jump in and be involved, and chapters. It would be great if we could get some campus participation. Our only concern is we are not having this conversation 6 months ago. We're having it February 2nd. And I would just encourage us if we could all understand that there is a sense of urgency. So when we do the amendment, I think for headquarters purpose, we just like to know, does that mean that we should put everything on hold, everything, until the committee gets together and agrees? Like, where does that leave how far we can?
You're answering Yvette Walker's question, which is this, should we just have a motion to agree to do this year and then form the committee? Yvette, you want to speak to that since she addressed that, and then I saw Matt's hand and then Lauren.
So perhaps there could be a motion, I'm just talking in my head right now, perhaps there could be a motion that say that we move to celebrate the 110th anniversary of SPJ and have conversations with potential fundraisers. And that's it. Well, maybe that's it. Or maybe to that we would say, and continue to and form committees to work with chapters and other related entities, or something like that. That's very bad, but at least it would allow us to acknowledge, yes, we are going to decide to celebrate it, and we can continue to have our conversations with our potential funders.
Okay. If you want to put that on the motion on the table, I can call for a second and then continue with the people who had their hand raised.
Matt, you're more eloquent than me. Can you put that into verbiage?
Well, Matt, you had your hand raised, so you were next, but I don't know if you weren't raising your hand a second. Did you? Oh wait, you're mute. Mute.
I apologize. Yeah, thank you for passing the baton so gracefully. I don't know if I'm as eloquent as you, but I would, and I don't know, this is just a point of order. I think staff, we don't think we need to direct staff to do the first part of your motion, which is to have communications with potential funders and to kind of get the ball rolling. So I would just incorporate your thoughts by suggesting that we create a working group of board members together with staff and chapter leaders, to both of Yvette's points, to celebrate the 110th anniversary, and again, at no cost to SPJ.
Okay, now to be clear, I think what Yvette is also trying to get at is the idea that we would celebrate the 110 so the staff can get started working trying to solicit fundraising.
And just a point of order, don't we already, Matt, didn't you already make the motion from executive committee? So do you just need to make a friendly motion?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do, just to amend the motion that we kicked out first to include chapter leaders. So I think that's a really smart idea.
But I don't remember, I think Yvette's point, Yvette, yeah, but we haven't actually had a motion in a second. I think Yvette's point was that the original motion also
Yvette Walker, I'm sorry, I'm trying to.
No, I think the original motion did not specifically state that we would celebrate the 110. Was Yvette Walker's point.
Okay. Right, but we have a motion on the floor that we're discussing.
But we don't actually have a motion because we haven't had a second. Matt mentioned there was a motion in exec. He didn't. I don't believe we had a second.
My original.
Yeah, I seconded his motion, so he can. If I will accept that as a friendly amendment,
Okay.
if Matt accepts that as a friendly amendment to his own motion.
Matt, do you accept that?
Yeah, so we're clear. So now the motion says to have staff celebrate the 110th and have the board, together with staff and chapter leaders, plan the 110th anniversary at no cost to SPJ.
Excellent. Okay. So, and for the record,
I like that.
Matt, Lauren, and with the friendly amendment from Yvette Walker. Okay. No further discussion? Patty, you have your hand raised.
Thank you. I don't object to either of these motions that we are dealing with, the one on the 50th, the one on 110th. But I would just say, friends, that we have spent an enormous amount of time talking about this so far. These are staff initiatives. If board members want to weigh in, absolutely weigh in. Let the ideas fly. But we're board members. We're supposed to be strategic and thinking about big issues. And these are big issues, right? But I don't think we need to take on the work of the staff. These are ideas. We can debate them. And you know, to the point of that Allison just made, we're already in the 110th. And now are we going to gum up the works and slow down the process by putting together a group that has to have meetings, that green lights things that the staff already has underway? Everybody has their right to an opinion, absolutely. But that's just what I wanted to say on that. Thank you.
Okay. Any further comment on this motion? Okay. Very good. We'll proceed to a vote. There's a motion on the table. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And I saw Don raise his hand there. Okay. Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay. The motion is approved. Thank you. Okay. And I think we should move along. We do have a very full agenda. Now, this next part does have to be a split discussion because we're discussing the budgeting process for the coming fiscal year. And as I've pointed out, I believe you all know, we cannot discuss individual contracts or partnerships in public session. So first we will discuss Allison's memo and broad planning for next year. Then before we move into executive session, we'll allow for public comment period. At that point, we'll move into executive session, and if we have further questions that involve particular contracts, then we can move to that then. Okay, so without further ado, Allison, please present your memo.
So I was asked to put together what is a very, very, very preliminary memo on budget planning for fiscal year 2020. The process for budget planning is quite extensive, and we are actually going to be working at like kind of record speed this year to get it done, because it involves meeting with each individual staff member, except for 2 who report to the communications team, but meeting with each staff member to go through what they are planning for the year and if that requires any funding. For example, I need to meet with Tarat, because he does all the conferences and events, to find out whether or not the National Press Club is going to keep the room rental and all of that for the SDX Awards the same for 2020 as they have for this year, and little things like that to make sure that we come as close as possible in allocating funds for each department. So we had set the date February 28th to have all of that done and to have created a kind of internally a draft budget based on some research that we've also had to do on spending habits prior to March of 2018. There are some areas that are really obvious where we can make some cuts, and we already have. We've gotten rid of some consultant work and brought it in-house. An example would be advertising. We don't have a consultancy fee on that. So there are some things that we've already done looking towards 2020 and also 2019. Because to be really honest, our major concern at this moment, 4 months of the year, is closing the deficit that we have. That's me and Larry and the other staff members, because everyone's involved in fundraising, although Larry and I sort of carry the torch on it. That's our biggest, our number 1 priority, and our number 2 priority is to secure, because the foundations and whatnot are year to year, to secure funding for September, starting in August or September. In some cases, it may start in April of this year, for fiscal year 2020. So we're now, working with our partners, Scripps. I have a phone call with them this week, and a couple of others, Google, Facebook, on the next wave of partnership.
Mm-hmm.
So those are our major things. I mean, I hopefully the document is pretty clear and we can take questions on it. I will say that I think that we're pretty lean, and so cutting costs, while always an option, that our big focus needs to be on bringing in income and diversifying income, which Joe Skeel started, and we're keen to continue.
Okay. Moving along to discussion. Does anyone have a question, comment? Okay, Patty?
I'd like to start us off with having Allison and Larry review for us the partnerships, relationships that we have, and if we could take them one by one, just an update on where we stand in our relationships and by that I mean, what are we doing with these various partners right now? What's our best guess on future relationships with groups? So Scripps, Google, Facebook, RTDNA, I think are my 4 biggest questions. Where do we stand with each of our partners?
Okay, Patty, excellent question. Before you proceed, Allison, I just want to point out for the minutes that Jeff South has joined us, and welcome, Jeff.
And I need to also be clear. Obviously, we're in open session, and anything that you are not able to say, just clarify that you're not able to say certain things. Thank you.
We'll start first with
Oh, Allison, we can't hear you. Can you turn up your microphone?
Yes. Is that better?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. We'll start with RTDNA. So our contract partnership with RTDNA goes through 2020 Excellence Conference. Goes through 2020. And so that conference is in Minneapolis. Minneapolis. We are in discussions, but we haven't talked about it in a little while, for them to continue with us in 2021.
But
2020 is Washington. 20 is Washington, D.C. They're with us in Washington, D.C. 2020. 2021, we are in Minneapolis. I'm sorry, pardon me. And they have not said yes, and they have not said no on 2021 in Minneapolis. So we can be on our own, or we are currently courting another smaller organization to join us in 2021. That's where we stand with RTDNA. As most of you know, we just went through updating our partnership in terms of our working relationship for EIJ, and we're on track. And Dan, Shelley, and their board seem to be happy with the division of labor for EIJ, and Ashrad has gotten his stride, and it seems to be going really well. You agree? Yeah. Okay. So the next, which Patty didn't mention, was association management, because that's kind of a partnership, but it's our business. We are in the process of talking to 5 organizations this year. Okay, so we'll move to Facebook. So Facebook, our contract with them we don't really, I'm not sure we have a real written contract, but it will be a year in March since we've been working with Facebook. Our obligation to them trainings. We have to date had 61, and we have 29 scheduled between now and March. So obviously we more than doubled and will more than triple our commitment to them. So they're very happy with what's happening, and we're very excited about it. We're also excited. I don't know if you saw the news recently that they've committed financially a significant amount to continuing education of journalists and using Facebook tools and that sort of thing. So Lynn, Marina, work on the Facebook project, and we're in the process now of putting together a new proposal, really updating the old proposal with some new things that Facebook wants to do. They wanted us to scale up, and as part of that, we are looking at doing remote trainings and in some cases in-person trainings in the Caribbean and Canada. We'll have our first training in Puerto Rico in March. We have the only Spanish-speaking Facebook trainer currently, and we are hoping to get 2 more who can do the training all in Spanish. Google has asked us in October, I think, to come up with a different idea of training, areas that they're missing, and areas where we think the SPJ has influence or a large number of people that no other organization has. So obviously freelancers came up. So we've submitted a proposal to do training for freelancers. And we also have this, really deep regional organization at a kind of lower level from headquarters and have a lot of campus chapters. And so we submitted a proposal about training younger people. And as most of the funders we've been talking about are interested in diversity. So we're pushing around ideas for doing some training in historically Black newspapers and historically Hispanic newspapers, since we also have a Spanish language trainer at Google and the only Spanish language trainer in the Google system. So we have 3 proposals before them. As you must know or might know, they just hired, or they just had a big change in leadership. So what's Ma's first name? Kathleen, Christine? Ma is her last name, M-A, just became our Google person's new boss. So this whole past week, they've been in, I don't know if this should be public, in like a retreat. And they're talking about what their priorities and stuff are or whatever. So we're in the process of proposal and which one of the ideas they like the most, and then we'll find out what funding. So Google, Facebook, RTDNA, scripts. So we are doing 3 scripts this year. Okay, this is very tentative because Pinto just emailed me yesterday wanting to have a conversation on Wednesday as soon as possible. But tentatively, we have 3 scripts this year. They will be in Kansas City, Atlanta, Cincinnati. However, Patento says Scripps is really intrigued by the student part of this proposal. And I can't speak to that conversation because I don't know if it's something they want to do separately or continue with it in the current script program. So I'll let you know as soon as I know about that. Those are the major partners, hoping I haven't left anyone out. Did I?
Okay, did Larry want to add anything to the financial discussion before we go on? Do you shake in your head? No, okay. And one technical point someone asked in the chat box whether the problem with hearing Allison is that Patty's logged in as Allison Bethel McKenzie. I don't believe that is the problem. The deal is I sent individual invitations to all of you. If you click on the link I sent you, your name is there, so I'm guessing Allison forwarded that link to Patty, and that's why I think that the sound was probably a local issue to Allison's microphone, maybe because she was going back and forth with Larry. So that's a minor technical point. But in the future, because we're going to be doing these public Zoom meetings all the time now, if possible, please use the link. And I'll always have that 1 hour of a reminder. So just click on the link. You get an hour before the meeting. Okay. Thank you for your presentation, Allison. I'd like to open it up to public comments now, or to the comments from the board first, and then we will move into the public comment period. Sorry. So any questions, comments, thoughts from the board on this memo? Patty, are you raising your hand there? No. Okay. Any comments, questions from the board? Lauren.
Allison, that you mentioned that RTDNA is considering joining us for the conference in 2021. What is the timeline for that decision? Because I recall at the, I think it was the spring board meeting in Rebecca's year as president, that we had talked about that, and she had given a timeline for a response, and clearly they didn't meet that timeline. So for our planning purposes, we're already, I don't know what's defined as the last minute, but it's already getting kind of late in the game. When are we expecting to know one way or the other? And then also related to that, we discussed last week in executive committee, and I previously brought up a request to find out what it would cost to get us out of the contract in Minneapolis. People, for the background of the new board members, our interim executive director had brought us only one location. People weren't happy. They felt like they had no choice, and we want to revisit that because we're concerned in terms of being able to get speakers there, especially if we're on our own. And that's, of course, part of the draw of attendance at a national conference.
Thank you, Lauren. Before I hand that back to Allison, I do want to say one thing for the benefit of new board members. We vote on these conference locations years in advance at our big full day April meeting. So this April, we will be voting on the location for 2022. And many of us who were on the board last year were not too happy about getting one option. I mean, first of all, one option to vote is actually not really much of a vote. So we have submitted many ideas to Allison for the staff to research. It's not too late if you want to send ideas after this meeting for locations, maybe to Allison and I to add to the list. This is for 2022, however, but what Lauren's talking about is the possibility of changing the location for 2021. And Allison, can you speak to that?
I did get on that right after you brought it up. Does our I spoke to Holly Rose, who does our advertising, and Carol, who is in charge of like the hotels and that sort of thing for us. She's a contract person, and she came back with information on, after speaking with the hotel, on canceling Minneapolis, because I also feel that the hotel costs in Minneapolis are huge. They're like the same cost as like Miami or something, you know, and it's Minneapolis. So I'm really not happy about the high hotel costs. So she did come back with me, and I can share that with you guys this afternoon. I can forward it over to you. It shows how much it would cost for us to get out of. We can get out of it. We would take a little bit of a hit. But in the long run, it would be more advantageous than if we have only a small group of people come. So that's that. The other thing, what did you ask me? How to get up Minneapolis?
When we expect to hear from RTDNA as to whether they're going to join us in 2021 or not.
Yes, my understanding was that they were supposed to tell us right before EIJ in Baltimore. So I asked Dan about it, and he said, oh, we haven't decided. I don't know. So I asked him again right before Christmas and said, you know, what do you think? So I sent him a long message because we are having a meeting with another organization that they want to join us in Washington, D.C. So Dan and I are having a meeting with this smaller but prestigious organization. And I asked Dan, before we have the meeting with them and their board chair in the middle of the week, it's sort of an informational. So I can be able to bring enough information back to our board, and Dan can take enough back to his board to say, this is how many people they'd be bringing to the table, et cetera, et cetera. And they want to know, like, how's the money split, you know, basic logistics. So I said, before we go into that meeting about Washington, D.C., I really need an answer to take to my board during our April board meeting, because after April, it's kind of late to be courting someone for 2021. I have been courting this group who we are going to talk to see if I can get a 2-year commitment, one with us and RTDNA, and then one with just them and us in case RTDNA doesn't join us. But they're not so happy about Minneapolis. They're like, not that excited. So I've asked him to give me the information by the end of March so that I can include it something in writing saying they're not going to do it, they're going back or whatever. So
Okay, and as a reminder, Allison may be able to tell us a bit more about ongoing partnership negotiations and future partners at EIJ once we move into executive session. But are there other questions in general about this memo, maybe that do not pertain to individual partners, but for planning purposes? I don't see any hands raised. So, okay, no one on the phone. Okay. So with that, we will move into the public comment period. We have Bill, Bob Becker. I'm moving and allowing everyone to speak now. Hazel Becker and Irwin. And to be clear, I've actually asked Irwin to join because this does obviously impact the foundation, us once we move in to exec. So, hold on. So actually, let me start with the public comment period. And Bill, Hazel, Bob, you can all speak now. So do you want to just, since it's difficult for you to raise your hand, just tell us if you'd like to speak?
I would, as always.
Hi, Hazel.
Hi. I just wanted to say thank you to whoever the techie people are who got this meeting available to us who aren't on the board. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Hazel. What's on your mind?
As I put a note in the chat, I just want to say that I know the Freelance Community Board will be very excited about the freelance training, and I'm sure that Allison would have thought of getting us involved, but I just wanted to bring it up. I'm not on the board this year, but I will convey to Hillary and other board members that this is a possibility. This would be fantastic. And maybe Mike Riley would do some training for us.
Mike just, you can't see this, but he just raised his thumb in the air.
Okay.
So I think that's agreement.
Sorry, my mouth was full. I'm eating pizza right now.
Good for you.
Real Mike Riley.
Thank you. I'm done.
Okay. Let's see. We have Bob. I think are you the phone number there? Because we don't see your name, we see a phone number. No? Okay. Bill McCloskey, would you like to add anything in the public comment period? Okay, and Erwin is going to stay on the call once we go into exec. And I do see some people with some locations, by the way, in the box, some of which have been proposed, some of which I think are new, so we need to save those for 2022. But if there's no further public comments, I will entertain a motion to enter executive session.
So moved.
Lauren, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, that's Mike Riley. I saw his hand first. Okay. Any comment? Okay, and to be clear, we're moving into. Oh, wait, Andy.
Andy has his hand up, Alex.
Andy.
Can we state the reason for executive session?
Yes, and I was just about to do that, Andy. So the reason we're
comment based on what our reason is.
Okay, right. The reason we're moving into executive session is so we can discuss contracts and partnerships for upcoming sponsorships and whatnot. This is the part of the budget planning that we can't discuss in private. In public, because it does involve current contract negotiations. And we're also going to be discussing sponsorships and HR review questions. So those are typically the reasons we move in, is to discuss, and actually a legal question that we discuss with our lawyers. So basically all of the typical reasons. One is contracts, one is some legal advice from our lawyers that we need to hear. One is sponsorships, and one is HR. Andy.
Yeah, I have been thinking about this since the last time we had an executive session. In a good government sense, it's fine to discuss things that have refer to private people, perhaps litigation, a specific contract. But I do not support going into executive session to discuss a policy. And I can't think of a public body that has ever gone into a private session to discuss a policy. I think that's a bad precedent.
Well, we're actually discussing some legal advice and also some contracts related to partners. Patty, did I see your hand up? Or I can't tell sometimes when you're adjusting something there. Okay, but I do see Lauren's hand up. Yes, Lauren.
So related to what Andy's saying, there is, I think, a portion that needs to be an executive session because of advice from the lawyer. Mm-hmm. But can we split it so that we have that part in executive session and then go into public session to discuss the part that does not relate to the lawyer's advice?
We can absolutely do that if we reach a point in the conversation where we get through the lawyer's advice and the individual partners, the individual sponsors, and we feel that we need to go into a more general conversation. We can always vote to exit public session. I also believe we will need to discuss, or we will need to have a couple of motions, which we'll obviously need to exit public session for. And at that point, we can say that we're going to vote on this motion, and these are the reasons. This is what the conversation that we had. Everything that basically doesn't involve individual people or entities, et cetera. And as a reminder, we'll be turning off the recording once we go into executive session. Once we vote to exit executive session, and before we vote and continue that session, we'll be turning the recording back on, so this will live on our website. Andy.
So just along those lines, though, if we're going to be talking about the sponsorship policy, I would not vote in favor of an executive session now, because that will drive the public out. And so I say we reserve the executive session motion for the point where we're done talking about public matters.
I mean, obviously, I just said, if at any point in the conversation we feel, okay, this is something we can discuss in public, when we exit, when we vote on motions, we can talk about our thinking, we can discuss that in public, and the recording will be back on.
I'm suggesting the opposite. That we talk about the public part first, since the public is here.
And you're only, now be clear about which item you're referring to, Andy? Or is there a particular?
Is there any intent to discuss a sponsorship policy in executive session? And if there is, I'm arguing that we should discuss that publicly until we get to the point where it needs to be private.
Okay, Patty, that's actually your agenda item. So would you like to address that?
We could consider moving the agenda because number 7 on the agenda is continuation of the budget planning. That would require swapping budget. And I think there are probably some things I could say on the sponsorship topic before we go into executive session, if that's what you're asking, Andy.
Pretty much, because
okay.
it's an unresolved issue.
It is. I could certainly set the stage for what we're going to discuss in a general way, so that anybody who is listening right now and our recording will capture that. So I will make a motion that we move sponsorship task force up into.
You don't actually have to make a motion, Patty, to move the agenda. I'm just letting you know, just to keep things moving along, because we are 2 hours in the meeting. I can do that, and I'm happy to do that. What I do want to suggest is that we do something similar to what we're doing with the budget planning, which is we allow Patty to speak about the sponsorship policy and what we want to do. And then after we enter executive session, if there's anything Patty feels she could not say in public session because it has to do with partners, we then move into executive session. We allow Patty to continue. So then the sponsorship would become the first item before we move into executive. Or the last item before we move into executive.
So as a point of order, Alice, I'm withdrawing my motion to move into executive session at this time.
Okay, perfect. And then we move into executive session. We allow Patty to continue the sponsorship task force. And then we allow Allison to continue with the budget, and then we proceed as is. If everyone's fine, that will be the new agenda. We don't need to do a motion because the chair can change the agenda without bogging down the work and taking 5 minutes on a motion. So, okay, if everyone's fine with that, Patty, you have the floor. I'd like you to begin your sponsorship task force report now.
Thank you, Alex. Just to bring everybody up to speed, especially those folks who might be listening, at EIJ 18 last year, there were some issues raised by members, concerns about some of our sponsors for EIJ. There was a motion that delegates endorsed at EIJ to go forward with reviewing our sponsorship policies. After EIJ, Alex commissioned a task force that I chaired to review our approach to sponsors for our EIJs. That group worked through December 1 when we presented a draft of a sponsorship policy to the full SPJ board. At that time, the SPJ board voted for a policy with 2 amendments. And I believe that has become a public document, although I can't tell you at this moment where it lives, but I believe that's a public document. So as we go today's meeting, it's back on the agenda because there has been
some further discussion with on the topic that dictates that we return to the consideration of the question. And I believe that's all I'm at liberty to say in an open session.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further conversation? That was the last item before we move into exec. Andy?
I don't think it violates anything to say that RTDNA disagreed with the actions that our board took and to discuss what we want to do.
My only concern, Andy, is I am not sure how much they have made public at their end on their website with their members. And so I do feel as though covering some of this in executive session might be more prudent. Yeah.
I would remind everyone, and we've talked about this before, but when we create something like EIJ, which is a partnership, we do have obligations to our partnership. I mean, when it comes to a project like RTDNA, where we have 2 or 3 organizations, we do have to coordinate our communications with them. And that's it, all we can basically say now. Andy,
but
do you have an additional point to make, or is it just that you want to talk more about
I just don't see how creating a policy or voting on a policy is ever a violation of anything. It's not. It's our policy. It's not their policy.
Well, it's actually the EIJ policy, which we're voting on, and we'll discuss that when we vote on it, and we will vote on whatever decision we decide to make, and we will also, communicate if there is a change in our policy. We will communicate that to our members. I feel like because we continue discussion before moving into executive session, I do want to give the public one more chance to comment, basically reopen the public comment period before we move into exec. Bill, Bob, Hazel, Irwin, you're all on the phone. Bob, I see your hand. Would you like to speak? Bob, I'm giving you the floor. It looks like you're muted. I can unmute. You can unmute. Bob, I'm trying to unmute you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm not sure who else is still on the line. I'm a member of the task force.
Oh, that's a good point.
So I don't know who else is still watching who's not a member of the board.
Actually, that's a good point. Well, Hazel, Bill, and Irwin, I actually invited Irwin to stay on because this obviously, has an implication for the foundation. Bob, as you're a member of the task force and you know all the backstory, I'm fine with having Bob stay on. Patty is the task force chair. I assume you're fine. In that case, both Irwin and Bob would stay on at least for the first part of the executive session. If that is fine with the board. Okay. Excellent. Now, Bill McCloskey and Hazel Becker, did you have anything you wanted to say before we move into executive session?
No, I'm leaving. Goodbye. Have fun.
Okay. It's been good having you. Okay, so Hazel's dropping off on her own. Do we have a vote? Okay, we need a motion to move into executive session. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay. I believe that was Lauren with a second from Deb. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Nays? Any abstentions? Okay, we are moving into executive session, and you need to pause a moment while I pause recording. Okay, we have exited executive session. We're in public session now. We have 2 motions to consider. Lauren, do you have a motion to put on the floor?
Yes, I am looking for the wording. I think you have it in front of you, Matt, so correct me if I get it wrong. But this is related to the questionnaires for the executive, to assist with the executive director review, and that's to amend it to remove the language to survey former staff.
And to be clear, this is actually 2 words that would be removed, and former.
Correct.
In other words, the sentence says we're going to do questionnaires for current and former employees, so we take out the and former, and that's the amendment.
That is correct.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
I heard, was that Sue?
Yep.
Thank you, okay. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion is approved. Thank you, Lauren. Patty, we had some discussion on the sponsorship task force, and this was your task force. I'm going to make sure you're unmuted. It looks like you're muted. Trying to unmute Patty. So just give me a second. There you go. Okay. You're on.
Am I on?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Thank you. Sorry, I'm back to no. Yes, I would like to put a motion on the floor that the board move to accept the original draft of the EIJ 19 policy, EIJ 19 sponsorship policy as presented to the board on December 1.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, that's Yvette Walker. Okay, so we have the motion on the floor in a second. Is there any conversation? Any discussion? Yes, Andy.
Can you repeat what the relevant section is that we've talked about on how the wording would be, saying sponsors may not, and then the portion where it says the committee has the authority to reject, and so forth?
Certainly. Yes, I'd be happy to put this into the public record. I think a few points are worth repeating. Number one, that we have a contractual obligation with our partner for EIJ 19 and going into EIJ 20, that we work together on all matters related to the production of EIJ, including sponsorships. And that further, the proposal as originally written and what we would be returning to, let me be more clear. What we're doing today is removing 2 amendments that the board added to the original draft of the sponsorship policy. The 2 amendments in question, to be clear, that one was adding language that that sponsors would not be able to propose speakers. And in what I'm proposing here today, we are removing that amendment. Secondly, in what I'm proposing here today, we're removing a second amendment, which would be that would allow the possibility of sponsors being offered, sorry, not sponsors, speakers or panel members being offered honorariums or other kinds of fees for their participation. We're removing the ban on that from our language. And then lastly, I would like to emphasize that the original draft of the sponsorship policy and actually what did go forward does include what I feel are sufficient protections for all parties involved. That, and I'm going to read from some of the policy, that proposals for programs will be vetted by the EIJ Planning Committee, that the committee and its designated producer will assume full responsibility for participants, topics, times, places, etc. Furthermore, I would note that the EIJ partners who produce the EIJs will retain the right of refusal over all sponsors, exhibitors, or advertisers, with contracts reviewed by the executive directors of partner groups before accepting. So I do feel as though there are sufficient protections in the original and what I'm asking you to endorse today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patty. Any other questions or conversation? Andy.
I'm sorry, I'd just like to go back to that because what I heard now was not what I understood it to be before. When the phrase the right of refusal, I thought the right of refusal was on any recommendations by a sponsor on who is on a panel. So
Patty? Did you want to answer?
Contracts reviewed. The right of both what we originally submitted, Andy, and what was passed on December 1 had that language, and it does read, as I just said, that EIJ partners retain the right of refusal over all sponsors, exhibitors, or advertisers. So that, you're right, that does not pertain specifically to the composition of panels or other events.
Okay. Well, see,
But the earlier language does indicate that the planning committee has the vetting, does the vetting, and it's assumes full responsibility for participants, topics, times, etc.
right, but the question, and that's the million-dollar question, what does vetting mean?
Right.
I mean, vetting can just be crossing T's and dotting I's and like, yeah, they've been contacted. That's the right name for the program. I mean, I think we're now backing far away from what I thought we were doing.
That was the language that we considered before and that we've talked about all along. So if the word vetting upsetted you, or was not a suitable word, I think now is not really the time to correct that.
No, I know.
Well, unless you want to make a motion right now to correct that word and use
I would
it.
also point out that this is the task force language that was arrived at with the task force with our group and other groups involved with the EIJ, and was originally presented on December 1st. What we are voting on today is to approve the original task force motion, which we've had since before the December 1st meeting, and to remove the 2 changes that we made in that meeting.
Well, I guess the question here is I don't have the language in front of me. I just took notes on what you said the language is, and it's not what I thought it was an hour ago. I guess our question is, what are we comfortable doing? I mentioned earlier that I was more comfortable doing this, going backward, knowing that we have this, the wall is in place in a different place. It's not up front. They can still make their recommendations, but the planning committee can reject them. There's nothing now that I hear in that language that says that. And so do we want to do that? Because if we do, maybe we're just, going back and picking the same fight again over what each organization wants to do. I'm comfortable having some type of refusal process, and I think that's important based on what our members called for in the survey. If we're not doing that, then I'm not sure I can support it.
Patty, I did think the task force language addressed that. I'm actually looking up for the full language. Do you have the full
I have the memo that I put forward that we just talked about in executive session has the original language, has the amended language, and then has my additional verbiage on that. So it's unchanged from December 1. And Andy, to your point, I think the language that gives us the strongest protection, maybe vetting isn't it, but proposals will be vetted by the EIJ Planning Committee, and then continues, and this is the first bulleted item, once proposals are accepted, the committee and its designated producer will assume full responsibility for participants, topics, times and places, etc., period. So the committee and whoever the committee says is the producer, Andy Schatz, you're the producer of XYZ panel, has full responsibility.
Yeah, but see,
that doesn't cover every possibility. The wording could perhaps be stronger, but I think in practice, Andy, and as your representative to the EIJ Planning Committee this year, these are very collaborative conversations. And I'm going to tell you, as the SPJ person weighing in, I definitely am going to take a strong interest in any panels or any kinds of events that are sponsored by any particular sponsors that might raise red flags. So
I think the language here says, as Patty just said, the committee and its designated producer will assume full responsibility for participants, topics, times, places, etc. That means the committee does have full responsibility. That means the final say. I don't know. It seems clear to me that's the language that also has been agreed to by all of the partners on this task force already, and that we've had in front of us honestly now for 2 months since before the December 1st meeting. So I don't know. This is not really the time to revisit something we've had for 2 months that our partners have agreed to. Andy, did you have another point?
I do, because we're now saying what full responsibility means, but If I didn't hear it from the two of you, that's not how I would interpret it. To me, full responsibility means this is now up to you to carry this out. And from the situations I've been in where somebody volunteers to do something and you come back to them later, I want to know, did you contact the people? Do they know the date? Has this been publicized? That's the responsibility. I'm not talking about making judgments at all. I mean, so that's an unusual interpretation. I'm glad to hear it, but unless we spell that out, there's no way I would interpret it that way.
Yeah, I actually don't understand that, because to me, full responsibility for participants mean you have full responsibility for who those participants are. I don't actually.
I wouldn't word it that way. If that's what we mean, I would not word it that way.
I hear you. However, we have had this proposal in front of us for over 2 months, so this is the first time you're raising that objection.
That's not true. I've objected to it the whole time, Alex.
No, but I mean to that particular verbiage.
Alex, it's changed in the last hour.
No.
I've been taking notes the whole time. It has just changed in the last hour.
I'm
okay. I get where we are.
Let Patty speak. She's the task force chair, and she can speak to what you've had.
I strongly object to your characterization that I've changed something in the last hour.
Right,
I'm not
right.
trying to do some end run, some shell game here. It is as written and has been in front of us for a long time. But I understand your point that you don't think the language is clear enough or restrictive enough. So all I can say is the language is the language as it sits at this moment. If Alex is open to an amendment to change language, I guess.
No, I do want to make the point, and because this is rather serious, because what Andy said is actually not factual, and I do think we need to correct the record here. This is the language that the task force approved, and we were presented with. It has not changed in the last hour.
I will correct my own record. What I mean is that this has changed is that an hour ago we were told the program committee, my understanding of it, the program committee has the right of refusal. That's how it was explained to me. I've been taking notes about it. Now I hear that right of refusal only applies to who the sponsors are. And that was not the safeguard I thought we were passing. So maybe it's my own interpretation, but I just don't think this was clear.
Okay, Andy, I'm sorry it was unclear to you, and obviously you should vote how you feel on this language, but this is the language that we've had before us for just over 2 months.
Okay.
So what we're voting on now is going back to this original task force language and removing 2 changes that the board made in December, and establishing an EIJ policy that will be an EIJ policy for all of the major partners. Matt.
Really quickly, I want to emphasize that the reason I'm supporting this is because of contractual obligations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Any other questions, comments, concerns? I don't see any hands. Okay, Patty, you have made this motion. I have to say, I don't remember if I called for second because we've had such long discussion. We did. Who was the second on this?
Yvette Walker.
I was.
Yvette Walker, thank you. So we have a motion to say we have Yvette is the second. If there's no other conversation, I would like to proceed to a vote. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Nay.
Nay. Andy? Any abstentions? Okay, and we should also point out, I believe Lauren has left the call. I think she may be the only one who's not a part of this vote.
Sue
Okay.
and Don are gone as well.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so that should also be part of the record of the vote.
I
Okay,
think
thank
Sue is also gone.
Yeah, Lauren, Sue, and Don are gone by my count.
Okay, so they're gone, and we have 1 nay from Andy, and the rest are yays. Okay. Okay, so the motion is approved. I do want to say, I mean, I know that some people feel that no policy is perfect, but this is actually a red letter day because EIJ was in frankly, an awkward position before where we didn't really have a policy. SPJ had a very old policy before it did the EIJ partnership, but part of our EIJ agreement says that all of the parties have to agree on a policy. And RTD&A has already passed this policy that was approved by the task force. So we now have a policy, and that is a big step going forward. And I think will help clarify our rules for sponsorships and also, most importantly, for sponsored sessions. So thank you, everyone, for all your hard work. If it was easy, we probably would have done it before this year. But I particularly want to thank Patty, who has been tireless in this effort. So please, everyone, thank her offline, buy her a drink in April, whatever. But thank you, Patty. And Matt.
I'd like to make a motion, if it's the appropriate time, that we approve the working group's report on the executive director.
Yes, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Deb Kroll is second. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, I think we're good. We have a motion on the floor. Let's proceed to vote. I believe we may have lost a few more people. We'll do the census after this. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, you could actually look in the panelists. I think it's actually the same 3 people because I see 13 people listed. So I think it's the same.
Minus Koretsky, who's also fallen off.
Oh, I thought I'd seen someone else drop off. Okay, so you got that, Matt. Thank you very much. Any further business to consider? Okay, we passed a lot of motions. It's been a highly productive meeting. Thank you all for joining us for such an extended play board meeting on a Saturday. Yes, Andy.
Good point. I just wanted to come back to the issue of the SPJ training that we're trying to work on that is a substitute for what is leaving with scripts. I know that people on the call who are working with regional conferences may have some questions about this. The way it stands right now is that we asked for information, background training that we could put together into a curriculum. What we got from headquarters was kind of a mishmash. I now have a lot of stuff, and I'm trying to sit down and draft a curriculum that can fit all the conferences, but it's not going to work. I know we're trying to do 3 hours in Region 2. Some might have 60 minutes. I don't know how this is going to turn out. If we can just have something that's a session this year where we revive this tradition, we can try to strengthen it for next year. But please keep that in your plans. I know it's getting kind of late for some of the early planners, but please continue to have that session booked on your conference agenda if you can, and I will try to be in touch with you soon with more details.
Thank you. Good point.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further business to discuss before we adjourn? And I'm looking at the chat. It seems to mostly be farewells and thanks to Patty, all in order. Okay. If there's no further business, do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Okay. From Matt. Do we have a second? Okay, I heard Jeff South first. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, the meeting is adjourned and I am stopping the recording.